So we were picking stories where the author had specifically evoked vampire and had specifically used the word vampire. But we wanted that kind of representation because we wanted students to be able to push back. We wanted students to be able to say, but why is this a vampire story, right? The idea of witches, I think it taps in a little bit to what I was talking about of, a witch could blend.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Welcome back to a Broadview Press episode. I always love these. So today is all about vampires, vampire literature, and anthology, written by both doctors Robin A. Werner and Elizabeth M. Lewis. They are instructors in the Department of English at the University of New Orleans. And as I've just learned, Robin is also the associate chair. So make sure, shout that out. What's really exciting is this anthology. I've always had a fascination with vampires. I mean, I've had on Paul Tremblay talk about his novel horror movie. We've talked all about different horror films. My fiance came on and talked about Scream. So there's nothing like just getting to the root of the foundation of the vampire myth and lore. So thank you so much, Robin and Elizabeth, for joining me today.
Thank you for having us.
So I learned that you both went to grad school at Tulane, how you both
Yep.
met each other. So does that fascination with the Gothic, does it stem from Tulane, or do you both have kind of a different journey of how the Gothic entered your life?
So I was just kind of a spooky kid. I discovered Anne Rice in 1991 in high school. And that's probably why I ended up at Tulane because I was, throw a dart at the map. I did my undergrad at St. Lawrence University in upstate New York. And after 4 St. Lawrence winters, I was ready for something warm. So I applied to Tulane. I'd never been to New Orleans, but I wanted to visit New Orleans because of Anne Rice. And so that's kind of how I ended up here. But my PhD is in Victorian literature, and I studied actresses. So I wasn't looking at Gothic literature at all. But I started teaching it in our special topics classes here, which is really kind of the foundation of this project, is finding a way to reach students in kind of these gen ed lit classes where we're trying to really engage them in critical thinking and analysis. And so I started teaching vampire literature and horror literature kind of that way.
Mm. And then how about you, Elizabeth?
Actually, my area of expertise is modernism, British and American modernism, and performance theory. So I am coming into vampirism through modernism and Southern Gothic literature more than vampire narratives themselves. And it's really by association with Robin, that sorry, I mispronounced, that I have been introduced to vampire lore to this degree. So
Yep.
I'm the co-editor, and it's really, it's all of it's Robin's project, and I'm just along for the ride.
I needed a 20th century Americanist.
There you go.
There you go.
And she's right down the hall. And I stopped her in the parking lot one day and I was like, I have this crazy idea. Yeah.
So when it comes to like putting together an anthology like you have, I love how it's divided into the thematic elements, right? We have vampire and
Yeah.
race, vampire and sexuality, vampire hunger, families, power. So what was it for both of you, to create these thematic sections? Like, did that help choose the certain literary examples? What were the pros in that arena?
It went back and forth a lot. We had way more sections than this. The titles of the sections went through various iterations. But I think it comes out of, so I've been teaching vampire literature at UNO for I think 11 years now, 12 years. And when I first taught it, I taught it chronologically.
Mm.
And we didn't want to do the anthology that way because we wanted this to be something that was easy to teach out of, right? We wanted to create something that was going to foster discussions. And with what I found with chronology is I ended up teaching Survey of British Literature, but just with vampires, right? And we did a lot of history lecturing, and that kind of shut down discussions sometimes with my Gen Ed Lit classes. And so I started, before the anthology started, I started teaching kind of thematic units and putting together texts from different cultures and different time periods, and talking about the themes. And that worked better in my class. So that's how we organized this. This anthology was also inspired in part, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Broadview anthology of fairy and folk tales.
Yes, I love it.
Because
I teach it.
I teach gender and fairy tales out of that. And the first version of that had sort of, here's the Cinderella section. We're going to put together all of these different Cinderella narratives. Here's the Sleeping Beauty section and all these different. And so I was inspired by that. Don LePan from Broadview came by my office one semester. What do you need for next semester? And I held that up and I said, I need one of these for vampires. And he said, why don't you make it?
Yeah.
So that's the origin story. But what I think is really useful about it is you can go chronologically, right? And you'll notice that each thematic unit is chronological within that unit, and we've got an alternate chronological time period, pardon me, table of contents. But to me, it fosters connections in the literature. But you also asked, did that shape the literature that we put in? So the original draft of this was about 300 pages longer. It included lots of stuff that we really loved and we really wanted to put in. And our editor was like, nope, this is way too long. It's going to be way too much. And so we did have to play around because, we say in the introduction, a lot of these stories could go in any number of chapters. Like, so Nalo Hopkinson's Gritty Choke Puppy, which is one of a story that I actually discovered researching for the anthology and absolutely fell in love with. It could go in hunger, it could go in family, it could go in race, it could go in any number of chapters. And so there were a bunch of stories like that where we're like, where do we put them where they'll fit logically? But also we wanted balance. We didn't want, one chapter super duper short. We wanted things to kind of flesh out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so what is it like, taking a step back a little for everyone listening, what is it about the vampire just as a figure? Nosferatu, right, is now in our mainstream again with the new film adaptation. But what is it about the anxieties? Like the vampire has such this speaking to what's scaring and making the current culture frightened, right? Bram Stoker does that so well in Dracula. Why? Like, what are both of your hypotheses about why the vampire is just in every decade there's some new iteration of the vampire?
Well, and I feel like Bram Stoker's is so different from Nosferatu because what to me is enticing and also horrifying about the vampire is that they can be the person sitting next to you. And Nosferatu, at least I'm thinking of the 1922 film, pretty sure you'd notice that he looked different, right? But the sort of the big shift, and we talked about this, and I don't want to jump all over Elizabeth getting to jump in, but the big shift from folklore vampires to literary vampires that a lot of people date with Polidori in 1819 is a vampire that can pass as human, that can be in a ballroom, that might want to marry your sister, and then they're also a monster. So to me, it's a fundamentally different kind of horror than, say, Frankenstein's monster or The Blob, right? Because it's the horror within a person, right? It might be a monster next to you. And I tell my students, the person sitting next to you might be a vampire, right? Some vampires are not allergic to sunlight. They could be sitting there. Your instructor could be a vampire. And they love to put that in my course evaluations that I like to wear dark lipstick. But that to me is a very different kind of psychological horror, which at least to me as a reader is more interesting than the kind of rampaging, savage, hideous monster. You want to jump in, Elizabeth?
Oh, I just concur with what you said. I think that I think that's a great explanation. And I know that in the beginning, very beginning, we were grappling with how we were going to describe the vampire. How is it different than a zombie? You know, what are we calling a vampire? How are we identifying the
Oh
vampire?
yeah.
You know, what are we going to include? And that was several years ago at the very beginning, right? You know, when we were asking these questions. And then it led to who gets to be a vampire. That was one of the questions that became a directive. How do we identify the vampire? How do we define it? Who gets to be one? So those were definitely, wouldn't you say, Robin, the initial exploratory questions that we had in
Yeah, I
working with the
remember like a
anthology?
whole, oh, that's okay. I was gonna have a whole summer where we were back and forth on what are the limits? You know, does it
Yeah.
have to be fangs and biting
Yes.
and blood?
Yes.
And
Does it
we
have to be a bite?
and we
Mm.
decided that the limits for us were human looking, you know, can pass as human.
Mhm.
Not necessarily a former human, because some of the vampires are different species, but human looking and in some way taking the life force from a human, whether
Right.
it's psychic or whether it's blood, it's taking the life force from a human being. Because there are, if you look at some stories that the internet or some anthologies will list as vampire stories, they don't all meet those criteria. You know, but some of my
Yep.
students push back. Some of my students say, you know, unless they bite and drink blood, it's not a
That's
vampire.
it.
You know,
Mm.
so that was a decision we had to make.
Yeah. So,
Exactly.
do you both know the film Suspiria?
Yes.
I've
Oh,
heard of
okay.
it. She
Okay.
It's
But
dance horror.
dance horror, yeah.
That
So,
dance horror is what I'm working with right now.
oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
So, something that I find in that film, the reason I just bring it up is it's like witchcraft, but not really, almost like they're
Yeah.
taking away the force of the students and invading their psychology. Yeah. So, like, there's a lot of blurriness between witchcraft and vampiric energy.
hmm
So, like, I'm
There's psychic.
curious, and
Yeah.
psychic energy. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Elizabeth. So, when I think of Stephen King, I think of Salem's Lot, but you also think of
hmm
all of his other psychological horror. Like, mostly everything else is outside the vampire realm.
Right.
But why do you think authors, like, or maybe those that you have put in the anthology, it seems
hmm
like a lot of these writers are really interested in both witchcraft and
hmm
vampires. Like, does the vampire and the witch share any similarities in your opinion?
Elizabeth should answer this one because there's a lot of stuff in the race chapter, which she kind of took the lead on that talks about that. So I think she should turn it around. I mean, I can take an answer too, but
Well, folklore, as we mentioned, was essential in the evolution of the vampire, and periph- porphyria was a disease that was believed to be, it was thought that these people were vampires who had this skin disease. So uh, a lot of the folklore myths and legends then get translated into vampire tales. And Robin, this is what we worked with as well,
yeah.
because that was what we definitely were grappling with when we worked on the race chapter. And
Yeah, the African culture didn't have
yes,
any vampires until after colonization, and the Europeans brought it with them. But they had a lot of witchcraft legends where the witches would suck the life out of people. And so then the Europeans came and called those vampires.
and then one encapsulation or one piece that we have that really encapsulates this, um, our discussion here. I really think that it is the White Witch, that poem, The White Witch, Harlem Renaissance, and that is the White Witch then is vampiric, and don't you think that's where the vampire becomes kind of a metaphor, Robin?
hmm
You know,
Yeah, the vampire is definitely a metaphor in that one. But
yeah.
um, we see that in a number of stories. This may be a little tangential to your question, but the Sousseyant stories, which are
Yes.
Caribbean vampires. Some people
Yeah.
read them as witches, some people read them as
Yep.
vampires. And one of our rules was we didn't want to do that kind of colonizing move where we call it a vampire. So we were picking stories where the author had specifically evoked vampire and had specifically used the word vampire. But we wanted that kind of representation because we wanted students to be able to push back. We wanted students to be able to say, but why is this a vampire story, right? The idea of witches, I think it taps in a little bit to what I was talking about of, a witch could blend, right? They could be, sorry, I just geek out a little bit about Agatha all along, which my family really loved. But they could be that kind of slightly eccentric woman next door, right?
Yeah.
And so that it taps into a similar kind of horror, maybe if we're talking about more contemporary stories, in that why we're afraid of them. But I think there's a fundamental difference there because the vampire feeds on humans, whereas the witch, it's different, right? They manipulate or they exploit, but it's not feeding. And hunger is just so much a core part of vampirism. That's why we had to kind of make a hunger chapter, which I had never really thought about, but it's this idea that vampires being defined by their hunger.
Exactly. And that was, to kind of to extend your question a little bit, this is what we grappled with the race section, as we said, the sequoia in African folklore. She figures in some of the works that we have in the anthology. And that's what we talked about, Robin. Is this a vampire? Is this a witch? Then making the ultimate decision. Well, she feeds, right?
Right.
She feeds. So this is why we would put it in the category of vampire.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was trying to turn off my notification.
No, it's fine.
Email. I think my email just pinged.
Yeah.
So
of course it did.
I think witches are interesting too because the folklore vampires were hideous, right? They were much more like zombies. They were these shambling creatures, and with witches you get very different. I mean, it depends on your story. Our colleague who also went to grad school with us, Dr. Shelby Richardson, does Witches in the Middle Ages. And you think about, you just taught the Scottish play. Sorry, I was a theater major, so I'm going to call it Scottish play. But you just taught that. And I've seen productions where those witches are hideous, green-skinned. And I've seen productions where they're beautiful sirens, seducing the protagonist. And so it's sort of like vampires, you get Nosferatu with his hideous rat-like features, or you get Lestat, who, even though he's this horrible, destructive person, I guess, is just so beautiful that he still gets people to do what he wants.
AI is incredible. It can teach you how to fry an egg and even write a poem, pirate style. Yarr! But it knows nothing about your work. Slackbot is different. It doesn't just know the facts. It knows your schedule. It can turn a brainstorm into a brief. And it doesn't need to be taught. Because Slackbot isn't just another AI. It's AI that knows your work as well as you do. Visit slack.com/meet Slackbot to learn more.
LinkedIn is pretty great at a lot of things, like helping you tap into the latest trends and insights in your field. We cannot stop your coworker from tapping her pencil. LinkedIn can help you find new jobs that align with your career goals. We cannot help you find the source of that weird smell in the office fridge. Ew. And while we can't stop your coworkers from bringing their hobbies into the office, LinkedIn can help you bring your career to the next level. LinkedIn is the network that works for you.
Well, and like even the Sanderson sisters and Hocus Pocus breathe, like take in the life force.
Right.
Very
of the children.
Yes, very ancient
vampiric.
Greek and very Circe, keeping Odysseus captive. I mean, right? Witchcraft and the vampire legend, they have such an ancient Greek root.
Well, and the female vampires all in so many iterations suck the life out of children, right? That attacking children is associated with female vampires, from Philip K. Dick's The Cookie Lady you know, all the way, you know, to Dracula's Lucy, to Moreno Garcia actually plays on it in Certain Dark Things, which I'm going to be presenting on at the Pop Culture Association. This idea that we think of male vampires preying on women, female vampires being seductive to men, but actually sucking the life out of children, in this kind of violation of our ideas about nurturing and things like that.
Right.
Yeah. So do you feel like, for both of you, you know, this is a hard question to pose to English literary minded people, but because I do feel the field has opened up so much now to pop culture, like you've just mentioned the conference you're going to, Robin, do you feel that the literature that you added to the anthology helped both of you just tap into, whenever now you're watching a vampire film, understands the context more? Or do you feel, I mean, it's hard for us to kind of like take out our critical lens when we're watching something, but do you feel that just an everyday audience member watching the new Nosferatu, like they're going to see it like as this novel thing without all the background history and legacy there?
Well, so that's an interesting question. I'm gonna, if you bear with me for just a minute. So the paper I'm presenting at Pop Culture Association is actually on a contemporary, not contemporary, it's 2016, but Moreno Garcia's Certain Dark Things, which I'm arguing is in conversation with Dracula. And when you read them together, Moreno Garcia enriches your understanding of Dracula, and Dracula, you notice many references and things in Moreno Garcia that you wouldn't notice if you just read it on its own. And so I feel like it's the same thing to me when I'm watching pop culture vampire stuff, is that I've got so many references in my head that I'm seeing things that I wouldn't see otherwise. And it's this kind of thing where you can kind of turn it off. Like, you know, I know a lot of my colleagues in vampire studies got very mad about the movie Renfield. I thought it was cute because I was able to just go, whatever, Nicolas Cage as Dracula is hilarious, right? But I think that when something in pop culture is trying to be elusive, then it does, having your knowledge of these other things, it helps you pick things apart. So I have a student in my vampire literature class who took my ghost stories class last semester. And I, at the start of the semester, said, okay, I've gone and I've seen the new Nosferatu and I have some thoughts. And that student was able to jump in and talk because I think even though she hadn't read a ton of vampire literature, she had taken a class with me before, kind of knew what I was going to be on about. And now they've all, they did student presentations. So they did a student presentation on the original Nosferatu, and they have thoughts. So it definitely is this kind of thing where it can cross-pollinate. But I at least can still kind of shut that down a little bit and still enjoy cheesy pop culture. I don't actually like horror movies, which is a strange thing to say. I can read horror, no problem, but really like scary movies, I get night terrors. So I watched Nosferatu, that was fine. Mostly I watch comedy vampires, or like, you know, I mean, I have thoughts about Anne Rice's various iterations on TV and film, but you know, I watch things like that. I don't like, if it's actually supposed to be scary, I don't
not
like
for
it.
you.
It's not for me. My students are always very amused by that. They're like, but you teach all the spooky stuff. I'm like, well, yep, literature.
Yeah, very different medium when it comes to the shock value.
Well, speaking of the intersection, what's interesting is that all of our chapters are framed by films.
Yeah,
you know, so really thinking about Blackula. Right? I mean, that really helped me, and Robin, you were instrumental too in helping me think through that one. But yeah.
So that was a last minute decision. We were like, you know what? We really need Blackula in the anthology. So we had it as the introduction to the race chapter for a while. And then we were like, no, we want that opening scene. And that we couldn't find the screenplay anywhere. So I actually sat in my office for a day with headphones watching
Transcribing.
it.
And transcribing it.
Yeah,
I
and
know,
my
Robin,
students have
that
been
was,
excited. They're like, "This is so cool!" So
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you did
Well,
a great job.
and so what was the film that you chose for sexuality?
what did we talk about?
Did
I
we
don't
choose for
remember.
sexuality?
I think I talk about Bela Lugosi's eyes.
Oh, you do.
Yes.
You do.
Yes,
Oh,
because that stare that he does, that my students just think is funny. They laugh when I show the movie in class.
mm, mm.
Um, but that it was, yeah, one of the most potent images in Todd Browning's 1931 film Dracula is the recurring close-up of Bela Lugosi's eyes.
Yeah.
But every woman who he stares at falls prey to him. So yeah, I started with old school Bela Lugosi, and this idea, we first see him when he enters that film staring at this like flower cellar, and she just kind of, oh, and of course Lucy, and so I actually went old school with the sexuality. Obviously, there's like I love Tom Hiddleston and the Only Lovers Left Alive, Tilda Swinton and Tom Hiddleston.
Ooh, ooh, ooh,
If you're
ooh.
talking
Yeah.
about sexuality and vampires. And of course, I taught a whole generation of students who were obsessed with Edward Cullen. Never could get into those myself, but a whole generation of students who were obsessed with that. So, it depends on what you mean. But we decided to do the older reference because the sexuality chapter was actually one that the race chapter and the sexuality chapter were ones that we really struggled with. And Elizabeth took the lead on the race chapter. I took the lead on the sexuality chapter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
reason we were struggling with it is that it encompasses so many ideas. When you hear about sexuality and vampires, you think about, well, vampires being sexual, you think about the bite being like a rape, or like a seduction, but you also think about the number of, going back to LeFanu, LGBTQ plus stories that were only being told in horror, right? They like you have Sue Ellen Case in Tracking the Vampire, talking about reading these vampire stories and the vampire as lesbian. And we wanted to include all of that, but the other thing that we really thought about is the issue of consent. And I've gotten into debates with other vampire studies people about this, but for me, that's a really big one that my students get really engaged with debating. If you've got a much older, much more powerful, figure with the ability to mesmerize you, like even if it's like a romance novel, right? Even if it's like paranormal romance, can you really be consenting because of this power differential? And so we wanted to interrogate that idea of power, of consent, of desire. And unfortunately, we couldn't include Anne Rice in the anthology. There was a Anne Rice story that we had in there that really worked, but Anne Rice's people would never respond to any of us. So we couldn't include Anne Rice in the anthology. But I think Rice's work really speaks to that idea of, for instance, in Interview, does Louis know what he's consenting to? Lestat says, I'm going to give you a choice, but his choice is this or death. And Louis has no way of knowing what he's consenting to. So, on one hand, I don't want to tell anyone who, thinks vampires are sexy that they're wrong, because there are definitely pop culture examples of sexy vampires, and let's delve into that. But I think it's such a complicated, multifaceted chapter that goes in so many directions. And that's why I love that we were able to include Poppy Zebright and Billy Martin. Billy Martin is his name, but he asked to be published under the name of Poppy Zebright because that's what the novel Lost Souls was originally published under. And that scene, I think, really encompasses a lot of aspects. So on one hand, it's seductive. You've got a male vampire seducing a young man. But on the other hand, the young man says, please make me a vampire. And he just kills him because nope, can't do that. that's not how it works. So the young man enthusiastically consented, but has no idea what he's consenting to, and ends up dumped in the Mississippi River. And so I think that does round out the chapter pretty well, and in all of the many facets of that chapter.
Yeah.
All the complexities of sexuality.
Yeah. And consent. I think consent goes throughout that whole chapter. And, I think that goes back to Lucy and Mina and Dracula and, not having the opportunity to even be asked to consent.
Yeah, definitely. Consent is the linchpin in the whole whole conversation, debate, however you want to describe it.
Yeah, I'm always
tricky stuff.
Yes. And Lucy's so interesting because in the novel she has the multiple suitors, and it's almost like she's already going against.
Why can't we marry 3 men?
Yes.
Yeah.
So she's like going against the marriage norms and is, punished in a way by becoming this vampiress. But just that scene, like where the men are all injecting her with their blood, and like I know I've read Nina Auerbach or, in line of that kind of thinking, what you've described, Robin, as like a type of, essay, sexual assault, and it really is, though, also interesting that then she does take the power back by becoming a vampire, but of course has to be punished now.
Right. So I don't have my stake. So when I teach Dracula, it's a poster tube. It's about like that long, about that big around. The stake that they used to kill Lucy.
Wow.
Van Helsing carries in a cricket bag. It is described as 3 feet long, 2.5 to 3 inch diameter. And the students just pass over that and they don't read that. And then I come in with this poster tube and I stick it up on the desk and I'm like, so I'm 6 feet tall. I'm really tall. And I point out to them, like, I'm probably taller than these men. I'm certainly taller than Lucy, who is described as a little girl. And, so we if we assume, women's heights, average height for a woman in the Victorian era is like sort of lower 5 feet, like 5'4", 5'2". So we assume she's little, like say you're a 5 foot tall, thin woman, and we've got this 3 foot long stake, and I have an anatomical drawing of a heart that's about the size of my fist. And I hold the poster tube up against my fist, and I'm like, look, I'm 6 feet tall. This would not pierce my heart. This would obliterate. And the students just they get so into that discussion, and and of course Dracula is killed with a Bowie knife. So Bowie knife and a Gurkha knife. So a Gurkha knife is like 14 and Bowie knife is like 12 inches, and it takes a 3 foot long, 3 inch diameter stake to kill Lucy. But the other thing that's interesting, so you bring that up, Mina, in contrast, when she is attacked by Dracula, is sleeping innocently in bed next to her husband. And Dracula breaks in, flings him across the room, and basically starts to do the same thing to Mina that he has done to Lucy. So on one hand, there's this argument that, like, Lucy was an inappropriate woman. She had inappropriate desires that she expresses in a letter to Mina. And of course, she doesn't want to marry 3 men because she wants to have sex with 3 men. She wants to marry 3 men because she's afraid of disappointing them and doesn't want to reject them, right? And she becomes this beautiful, vampire who's, oh, Arthur, kiss me. And of course, she's, biting children, but then she has to be put down with this massive stake, right? Whereas Mina never quite gets there. Like she's fighting against it because Mina's our good girl, right? The students get really interested in that discussion. And
the props.
And the fact about female vampires being so desirable and that being part of the problem. So Dracula's breath reeks. Even when he's young, he's not that attractive, but the female vampires are really, really desirable. Throughout the anthology. Like the only female vampire I can think of in the anthology who's not desirable is Lady Duquesne, because she's like 120. But even then we're told when she was young, she was beautiful.
Instagram teen accounts have automatic protections for what teens see and who can contact them, plus time management tools. And Instagram will continue adding built-in safety features to help create age-appropriate experiences. Learn more about teen accounts and Instagram's ongoing work to protect teens online at instagram.com/teen accounts.
Disney Plus wants to know, are you ready? For Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, The New Avengers, now streaming on Disney Plus.
Let's do this.
One of the best Marvel movies of all time is now streaming on Disney Plus.
Hey, you weren't listening to me.
I said Thunderbolts, The New Avengers is now streaming on Disney Plus.
Meet the New Avengers.
That's a cool name.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts, The New Avengers, rated PG-13, now streaming on, you guessed it, Disney Plus.
Well, I just saw the musical Death Becomes Her.
Oh,
which
brilliant. Yeah.
I love the movie too. But I'm even thinking of Isabella Rossellini's character.
Yes.
And like you kind of just wonder, well, how is she staying this young? Like, or how does she look this young? Like she says she's taking this potion, but there really is no origin of how she obtained this. So I don't know. I'm always just fascinated with, now I'm teaching Wicked. And this is my first time teaching it alongside the movie. And, you know, like that whole origin of just why is Alphaba, how does evil happen? Or how does wickedness happen? And like, that's a very fairy tale question. Like, why is the villain a villain? Why are they seen in this wicked light? But, you know, the way that you both deal with all of these themes are so interesting. And like the sexuality element, I mean, I'm just drawn to with my own queer studies research, but like rewatching last night, Bela Lugosi, I actually find that even though I love the 90s version of Dracula, specifically with Lucy, I think she's incredible, that actress. But is Bela Lugosi does have such this powerful queer gaze that he's giving to Renfield at the beginning or any of his victims, but specifically there is that moment where he like gets really close to his male victim and you don't know if they're going to Arthur
Harker.
I
don't know if that's what it is in the movie, but
yeah. So well, I feel like in the Bela Lugosi film he calls him Renfield.
So there's Renfield. So the Bela Lugosi film, they switch it up and they send Renfield to Transylvania. What I was jumping on, I was thinking of Christopher Kraft as you were talking. So I was thinking of Kiss Me with Those Red Lips, great classic analysis. Because in the novel, of course, it's Jonathan Harker. That's what I was sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
And there's this great scene where Harker is trying to shave and Dracula comes up behind him, but of course Harker can't see him because Dracula has no reflection. And Harker cuts himself, and careful how Dracula obviously wants to bite him and resists because throughout Stoker, and I think also throughout the Bela Lugosi movie, we have this hint that there might be these connections between men, but then it's shut off. Right. And so then Dracula preys on the women and in a way, of course, in the novel, gets all of the men's blood by way of Lucy. But he has to go through Lucy. He can't bite the men because that kind of queer reading is cut off. And Christopher Kraft, if you haven't read it, does an amazing job. I'm saying that to your audience in general.
Yes.
If you haven't read Christopher Kraft, it's in the anthology. No, Christopher Kraft, Kiss Me with Those Red Lips. He does an amazing job of looking at those tensions and the denial of them, that we have that kind of longing.
Yeah, I've kind of wondered, has Christopher Kraft continued that research or, I mean...
That's an excellent question. I looked him up because I was trying to, when I was teaching him, was trying to do a little bio and I couldn't find much. So I don't know. Christopher Kraft, if you're out there, let us know.
If you're out there, please. No, it's such a great, you're right. It's such an incredible essay. But like the Bela Lugosi film, it kind of reminds me of reading Oscar Wilde's Dorian Gray there's so much homoerotic potential I mean, Dorian Gray, there's a lot of homoerotic potential, but it's also Oscar Wilde. But there's so much that happens in the Bela Lugosi film that doesn't have to be explicit, but like that theme is there. Where the 90s film, it's so interesting to me where they have to, they make the vampire sisters really almost like escorts, seducing Jonathan
Harper.
Yeah.
And they do. So the Coppola movie, I think you're talking about, where they have to create this whole elaborate love story from past life to like force us to, I mean, it's very heteronormative, right? So now Dracula becomes absolutely, it's all about his true love, who is a woman. And we're sort of in this really like, in case you missed it, we're going to really emphasize this in the final moment. Whereas in the novel, it's a lot more ambiguous. But if you think about it from a vampire studies perspective, do any of the vampires actually want to sleep with them, or do they just want to eat them? And I mean the double entendre, but like, I mean, have you seen What We Do in the Shadows, the movie version? I mean, the series is great too, but in the movie version, they have this big, long discussion about why they want virgin blood. And it's, do you want to think about the cow you're eating having had sex? And they're of course doing it humorously. But that whole, after all, people are food, right? Like,
that whole contamination kind of issue.
Yeah, we had in an original draft, in an earlier draft, we had a chapter on like infection, and contagion.
Yeah, I know. So I have to watch What We Do in the Shadows, the film. So
I
have a homework assignment.
That's one of my favorites.
My fiance really wanted to watch Queen of the Damned, and I was like, I don't know if I want to see it, but I was like, I need something. I need to like go back to like a classic with Bela Lugosi to get in the mindset.
Lugosi. It is classic.
Yeah, but I mean, there's so many films, right? There's Dracula Untold. There's you said I should watch John Carpenter's Vampires, but that kind of looks
2000 Dracula 2000, which is set in New Orleans.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah.
There's
it's very cute. It's very silly, but yeah, it's set in New Orleans.
Sometimes the silly ones are enjoyable, right?
Yeah,
but
I'm not sure it was intending to be silly.
But even with like Anne Rice, like what are your thoughts on the Interview with the Vampire, the TV series? Because that took a lot more racial sexuality.
So I presented a paper 2 years ago, was it, Elizabeth? At Pop Culture Association on teaching Anne Rice in New Orleans. And it's now available in an anthology on teaching vampires from Palgrave. And I ended it because the series had sort of just come out. The first season of the series had just come out. And so I ended it talking a little bit about that. And so I have talked about that. I had a student actually do a research project on it as well. In terms of the race, I think it adds depth. I don't have a problem with it. This is a city with a complicated racial history, and moving it up in time, I also didn't have a problem with that. I thought that the actor playing Louis and the actor playing Lestat were great. My complaint is a little different. I don't know if it's going to take the discussion too far afield, but I didn't like making Claudia a teenager. I understand why they had to. But to me, that character is so disturbing because she looks like a child, and she's even younger. So if you think about the 1992 Neil Jordan movie with Kirsten Dunst, who was like 11, and then looks very young, but in the book she's 5. And when you read the book, so I have a son who's now 15, but when I was rereading Interview to teach it when he was about 5, and you're reading it, and then your kid kind of cuddles up next to you on the couch, and then you're reading the scenes where like Louis is cuddling with her in the coffin, and it's so much more disturbing than having her be a teenager. Like there's just so many levels of an adult intellect. Like you forget just how tiny and helpless a 5-year-old is. And so that was one of my gripes was I think the actress was brilliant. I think she did a great job. But making Claudia a teenager, that bothered me. The race didn't bother me. The other thing that bothered me is did Louis have to be have to run prostitutes? You know, like, so we have Louis in the book is a slave owner and exploits enslaved people, and now he's exploiting women. And you know, it's like, okay, can we like maybe not do that? But that was, you know, that was the time period, and that's where they went. So yeah, I think that the race added a lot. I think it was interesting. I think the actor was great. I don't know what your take on it is. I have not seen season 2. I am excited that they're gonna follow Lestat, because Lestat was always my favorite, even though he's awful and evil and abusive. When I was in, you know, reading this in the 90s in suburban Pennsylvania, Lestat was my favorite. Louis was just always whining. Like, I had to agree with Assad, you know, like he's just always whining. So
Yeah.
I don't know. Have you seen it, Elizabeth?
It's been so long, but yeah, I
Yeah.
understand. I do appreciate your critique that you just did on the adaptations, you know, because I think that, you know, I think that Claudia as a child that's really important in the narrative. And also, if you're going to, my thoughts are, if you're going to introduce race as a factor in this adaptation, why did you veer so far from the original enslaver to pimp?
Yeah.
You know, but as you said, we understand kind of culturally why that was
I had a bunch of students who were extras in it.
Oh, wow.
I had a student who was one of the prostitutes, and I had another student who was a John, and they didn't know each other, but they're the same when they were filming down here. I had, it's in the background of that first episode, I think it is. I had a couple of students.
Yay!
Well,
yeah.
And I think, like, as we're nearing, which I told you both,
yeah.
I always say to my guests, when we start, it goes by so quickly, but this has been such a fascinating, loved this conversation. Okay, so, right, you're in the heart of vampire Anne Rice, you know, garden, is it the Flower District or?
The Garden District.
The Garden District.
Is where Anne Rice's famous house was, yeah.
Yeah, so, right, even American Horror Story Coven, I think of, with the famous house that I think is just sold. It was on the market, I think. But, right, New Orleans has such this history of the Gothic and specifically vampire lore. So, you know, but like you both said, you're teaching in like a blue dot in a red state. You know, what is it like right now for you both? It doesn't just have to be, right, the vampire anthology, but what is it both like teaching literature right now in such complex dynamics? So, you know, if you each want to just speak a little about that.
It's hard. My students are happy to talk about gender oppression in the 19th century. And if I try to say, well, you know, how does that relate to today? The discussion shuts down. And that's new for me. That's like this semester new for me. You know, typically those kind of connections and those kind of leaps, the students come along with me. And right now they seem to be not really willing to make that connection. They'll happily talk about the past and literature in the past, even up through, you know, some of the stuff we're reading from the mid 20th century, but then they don't want to talk about today. And they want to come to me after class and talk about it. You know, so they still obviously want to talk about it, you know, and I have students stopping me in the hallway or coming to my office hours, and wanting to have these conversations, but they don't want to have them in front of class. You know, and it's scary as a faculty member. I have a colleague at another university in the state who received a public records request for his queer studies class syllabus. And he's like, you know, the syllabus is online. The only reason there would be a public records request is if someone's preparing a court case, you know.
Right.
So it's definitely a scary time.
It is. And I have the same experience that Robin is talking about. that students just do not seem to want to make a transhistorical leap from, whatever literary period that we're talking about to the present day. And they do just kind of shut down. I think that probably everything that you're saying, Robin, is self-consciousness. And
Yeah.
I also kind of get the feeling this morning, I kind of got the feeling that they just wanted to shut it out. Like they did not want to think about the political climate right now.
In a weird way, it reminds me of teaching after Katrina. The University of New Orleans was the only New Orleans university to reopen that semester. And I actually came back before there was potable water. I was back in October teaching at remote campuses, and I had to go teach Jane Austen. And I'm in there, and my students are coming in. It was a 5 p.m. class. And my students are coming in having been gutting their family homes all day. And I was like, I feel awful trying to initiate a discussion about Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. And they said, no, we want this. We don't want to think about today. We want to talk about something completely different. And so in a very different way, I think the students are definitely in a kind of trauma mode.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Especially because they've been hearing everything that we've been going through as a university, budget cuts, we're in such a perilous state. So yeah, I agree with you. They probably just want to shut it off, tune it out.
Yeah.
Well,
and
it's
definitely very, like, even from last semester, there's been a definite
absolutely
change this semester.
Well, after the election.
But right, it's so interesting because this is why the vampire lore, it's always relevant, right? Like the anxieties of the politics or your identity formation and who gets to count and who doesn't, who's seen as the outcast and
who's the monster.
The monster.
Who's going to report
right.
you, right?
Like a line I just really like, just because I'm seeped in Wicked right now, but is the wizard in the movie musical played by Jeff Goldblum has this line where he says, like what he learned back home, which is America, is what the people really want is a good enemy, and you got to give it to them. And I really feel like that, is what the vampire, it's something to unite around, right? Get your stakes out and we're going to have a mob party. So any lasting thoughts, just like, before I just have you both plug anything you're doing.
So we're going to be presenting in a few weeks at the Pop Culture Association. I'm presenting on Silvia Moreno Garcia's Certain Dark Things, which is a super fun novel that I think not a lot of people have read, but it's really interesting. It's set in an alternate Mexico City where we've known about vampires for 50 years or so, and vampires are sort of embroiled in the drug war. It's a really interesting novel, and Elizabeth's presenting some of her dance horror, cool stuff. But I also think I just wanted to put in a plug for why teach literature in a time like this? Because I had a student ask me that. So if you can indulge me just for a second, she said, she's a political science major. And she said, why teach literature? And I was like, well, because it's a way of talking about these issues that is maybe a little bit more comfortable for students who would be reluctant to bring these topics up in a political science class, just to name something. But I think also, those who do not study history are doomed to repeat it. And I think the fantasies and the horrors of the past are part of that history. And so I think that there's a lot to be said for looking at, because not all of this was seen as literature. I mean, we called it vampire literature, right? But not all of it was seen as literature.
Right.
At the time that it was published. But digging into that and thinking about what horrifies people and what makes people frightened or turned on, and what the deeper meanings of this, I think that's so valuable for our students. And I'm hoping that going forward, we can get them more engaged in discussions and opening up a little bit.
Your favorite local grocery stores like Kroger, Ralph's, Fred Meyer, and more are now delivering on Uber Eats. Get 40% off your order of fresh, quality ingredients. Whether you just got home to an empty fridge or suddenly got a craving to whip up something new, you can get everything you need delivered in as little as 25 minutes. Get 40% off your order with code Kroger2026. Plus, members get $0 delivery fees. Order now on Uber Eats. Orders of $30 or more save up to $25. Ends 4/30/26. See app for details.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only. Then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
Well, right. And I do feel like we're, in a way, I mean, I'm just seeing this, in North Jersey, where you would think, right, think that there's more open kind of conversations around politics. But, even here, there's just, I think the students don't want to step in anything that can target them,
Mm-hmm.
But I think thinking of the trauma informed, that these are traumatic times. I mean, the pandemic was a traumatic, their generation has not had really any time without America under
duress,
anxiety. Yeah.
Well,
duress.
9/11 happened when they were, born.
Right.
Yes.
So
teaching, I'm glad you spoke about that, Robin. I think that was really, important, helpful. And, the students really, I do feel every time I step, the classroom is more important for them than ever. I'm taking my students to the Met Art Museum.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Yeah. You can come. It's on Sunday. But, but they're so excited. So many of them, they grew up right by the city. I'm only 20 minutes from the city right now, and they have never gone to the Met. And I think these are moments, that educational moment of even exposing them to literature that you think the public really knows, but so many haven't read. And those are the exciting moments, in my opinion,
I think
the light bulb moments.
Yeah, exactly.
Inspiration and imagination,
Yes.
We need for them to be inspired, and we need for them to imagine.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we need that community too, right? These conversations and that, where's the just the Pop Culture Association, where is that conference happening?
So it's going to be in New Orleans, which is why I think many
exciting.
of our department are going. Yeah, it's going to be in New Orleans this year in mid-April. So
good. So if anyone's in
it's
New
a great
Orleans...
conference. It's a great conference. I plug Pop Culture Association and Vampire Studies group in particular. Monster Studies group and the Vampire Studies group are great people.
Okay. Yeah. And if everyone out there doesn't know too, because he's been on the podcast, Jeffrey Weinstock's Society of the American Gothic. Too. Yeah. We're all finding each other. And I'm part of...
he's amazing. I watched your interview with him.
Oh, really? Thank you, Robin. Oh, that's exciting. But also post studies, I, am friends with Dr. Kelly Ross, who her episode is actually just came out on the podcast when this premieres. So, getting everyone eager for the Gothic. Gotta tee it all up. So vampire literature and anthology, co-editors Robin A. Werner and Elizabeth M. Lewis on the podcast here. And you all get listening 20% off because Broadview Press sponsors the podcast. So ITBR 20, and that's for vampire literature and everything on their website. So with that, thank you so much, Robin. Thank you, Elizabeth. And do you want to plug any social media, Facebook, Instagram, if you want anyone to follow what you're doing, websites?
I don't think we're a little dinosaur-y.
Right.
That's okay. But
go to Broadview, buy the anthology, enjoy it.
Yes, enjoy it. And I'm sure too, they could find you both at the
Yeah.
University of New
At the
Orleans.
University of New Orleans. Yep.
Good,
And
good.
we're
Okay,
on vampire
so
studies, I think. Yeah.
good. So
Awesome.
I'll link that in the show notes along
Perfect.
with the Vampire Anthology link. So I can't wait
Excellent.
for more, not just educators or students, but those in the public. There's a lot
sure.
listening who I know are vampire fans. This is
Yep.
an incredible encyclopedia of sorts. Very,
Yeah.
very user friendly, which I
Well,
love.
thank you.
Yes, yes.
Yes,
So
thank you.
thank you, Robin and Elizabeth. This has been wonderful.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you have a great day, and bye to everyone out there listening.